And I'm back. Thank you all for everyone who listened to yesterday's episode. And yeah, hopefully today the intro sounds better. And I did change my setup. I'm using the sound recorder app on the computer because the one on the phone seemed to pick up a lot of background noise and everything. And the intro was a little bit quieter than I would have liked. So hopefully this sounds better. Anyways, overall, feedback was great for episode one. Arlo did say that he at first got worried when he heard about the mace training, thinking that it was spray mace and not a weighted mace that you swing around for working out. And it is a mace that you swing around for working out, and it does not have spikes on it. My mom asked that. But the concerns about mace training are somewhat valid because a while back we had squirrels in our attic. It was the squirrel crisis of March 2024. And they were up there for weeks. I had pest control come through. They put a one-way entrance. And it was a mom who was super loud, and then two juveniles who almost were full-size squirrels. So it was kind of a weird family dynamic. Seemed like possibly some arrested development going on. But essentially, it ended with me catching the mom in a trap and shooting her with a BB gun, which I guess does sound a little bit like a war crime, but more like a minor one, a misdemeanor, a war fine maybe. But I got her, and then the babies refused to leave. The juveniles refused to leave. So I bought some mace at HEB, and I went up there to spray it down. And the area they're in is above my office, and it's inaccessible to people. It's down the slant that follows the roof, so I couldn't reach them. And I got mace, and turns out mace is basically a one shot use it type situation. And I know people have joked about people online complaining about mace not being reusable on like Amazon reviews and stuff. And that's the first time I understood what they're talking about. It was not nearly enough mace. So I actually paid for Amazon Prime to bring me some bear mace because in my mind I had some KN95 masks from the COVID stuff and some work that I did up in the attic before. So I figured I'd have that. I wear glasses so my eyes would be fine. Like I'd wear a hat. And I would just kind of like crawl over to the edge and just spray the bear mace down was my plan. So I got the mace, got prepared, and I crawl and I start spraying it. Definitely lasts more than one shot. But I could feel my nose start to tingle. And as it's spraying, I sneezed inside my mask and it blew back on me. And I had little red spots on my face, and it definitely hurt quite a bit. But it did scare the two squirrels out into a line of rat traps, which overall, it was a very traumatic time. They did a bunch of damage to my car. They damaged some wires. They chewed a hole in the side of the house. There was a decent amount of problems with that situation. So we did get resolution, but it was, like I said, a war fine. Not great. And I'm glad I haven't had to deal with them since then. But I did, I guess, do some mace training back then. Because definitely normal mace, you're like, yeah, that's doable. Bear mace, though, it is like, it made the house smell like I'd cooked onions in it. And I'm not a big onion guy. So when Andy came home, she was like, sniffed around and she's like, were you cooking onions in here? And it's like, no. You know how I got some mace last time? It didn't work, so I ordered some bear mace. And the bear mace, it worked fine, but it's just the attic. You can't go up in there. No one should go up in there. And I had to awkwardly explain to the pest control guy that he couldn't inspect the attic either for at least a few days because it took a while to clear out. So that was my experience with mace training in the squirrel crisis of 2024. But overall, I really liked getting back into this. I forgot how much I missed it. And talking to Arlo last night about it made me realize that one of the things, this is a good way to challenge myself, but I would eventually like to maybe do some sort of improv or stand up, but it gives me the willies. Like it's very much a nerve wracking situation. So, whereas this is kind of like it's safe, it's a controlled environment, it's my house, it feels comfortable. I kind of chatter to myself sometimes anyway, so it's like it's pretty easy comparatively. Whereas being up in front of people, it makes me so sweaty, like just remarkably sweaty. But yeah, I was glad to be back doing this, and hopefully, this new recording setup will be good. And I was right that I indeed wasted $14 on that app. So next time, I need to remember that there are plenty of good free recording tools, and I have a good mic for a reason. And it wasn't that hard to just plug it in and play the intro song and then start talking. So I think overall, I think this is a decent format and everything. I think, yeah, it was really good to kind of just like talk things out and everything. Because recently I have been trying to be more proactive in helping my life. Like I've been making our attic a bit more accessible, and I've had to do some repairs up there and get tools and learn how to do things. And it's nice because it feels really good to be able to take control of your life. And I know a lot of times people these days, especially, will hate on AI. And I was actually not a fan of AI at all. Like, my friend Tom would be the first to tell you that I was very skeptical of it at first because, in general, the marketing was terrible. Like, I do not understand why they thought it would be smart to say, AI can talk to your family, reply to your loved ones, make cards and songs for people. It's like, that's not what AI is for. AI is for doing things that are tedious and learning about things. It's not what you should be using to message your loved ones. But I think in general, corporate people, it's a testament just how wildly out of touch some of the marketing is, that they genuinely thought it was good to shoehorn AI into everything before it was ready, and then also advertise it as a way to avoid having to read text from people you care about and a way to auto reply to people. Because that is definitely not a great use. Whereas for me, it's been very helpful. I have a Gemini Pro subscription because it comes with some storage that's very helpful, like 2 terabytes of storage. And then I also just find it's helpful. Like, I can have conversations to practice my French with it. I can ask different words and stuff. And it is nice being able to do the live feature and like share my screen to ask questions or share projects I've done. It helped me make bread one time properly in the bread maker, even though we did have to go back and forth where she was convinced that I actually needed to add more flour because I described it wrong. And I was like, no, this is super dry. And she was like, are you sure? Can you show me? And I showed her, and it's like clumpy and everything because it was going to be some oat bread. And she was like, oh, yeah, no, I underestimated when you said it's very dry. And I was like, yeah, no, I said it's super dry for a reason. Like, I wasn't just trying to oversell it, and realizing I had showed her the recipe, and I had also not followed the recipe. It was a very specific reason to use regular oats and not rolled oats, because rolled oats apparently absorb way more water than the other one. So it turned out needed to add some more milk, kind of change things up. Bread turned out great. And since then, I've used it to help with some home projects and get feedback on that. And it is nice to be able to do some of like tedious paperwork, test development, and stuff. So I think overall, it's helpful. I think it's definitely very much overhyped. And I think people tend to oversell what it can do because right now it does well if you give it a lot of context. But if you don't give context, it just kind of goes off the rails and everything, which is kind of understandable because I actually, as someone who's kind of like on the spectrum, I don't do well with ambiguity. Like it kind of just drives me nuts. I prefer well written instructions and a full game plan or general idea. Like it's very hard for me when it's just like an ambiguous, like fix this or make this work better. Whereas if you say exactly what's wrong and I have good context, I'm great at solving problems. And in a way, working with AI has helped me because I do have to explain things much better and formulate my thoughts properly. Because at the end of the day, its output does have a hallucination rate, to be fair, but its output really is only as effective as the input it gets in. So I find it's very helpful to give screenshots, explain the full problem, be able to kind of jump around. A part of me is wondering if Gemini already has ads kind of in it because I was asking the difference about an impact driver and a regular drill because I actually ruined my cheap Amazon one and ended up ordering a drill from Home Depot that ended up being late. And then I realized that I probably did need an impact driver because some of the screws are very long and the boards are very, very firm. The joists up in the attic, and with 3-inch screws, it was definitely harder on the drill than I should have. So I got one from Amazon, had a nice DeWalt set and everything. But when I looked up the difference between the drills and then trying to figure out whether or not brushless was worthwhile to upgrade to, it's interesting because the way it described some of the drills, it actually gave different examples of sets to buy and like sounded very much like it was upselling. And I guess maybe in my mind that might be the most natural way to work in possibly advertisements with AI and stuff, but it also does make it kind of hard if you don't necessarily know what is real or like what's necessarily being paid for. And it's hard because I think in many ways ads can be effective and it is helpful when I get a targeted ad that does give me something useful. It's nice, but it's not helpful when I'm searching on something with Google and now you have the AI results, which are fine if there's a question, but now you have that and then you also have sponsored results that oftentimes have ratings that you don't quite understand, and it's hard because Amazon reviews have gotten much less reliable recently because it feels like we are in this like hyper consumption culture where people buy a lot and then oftentimes there's rewards or little discounts for giving good reviews, and with grade inflation or rating inflation, everything has to be a 5 star. Like otherwise people are like, why did you give us 4 stars? Or like, what could we have done better? You gave us 3.5 stars. And it's like 3 stars is passable. Like if I'm going to IHOP or Denny's, a 3 star experience is what I'm expecting. And it's funny because it's like hotels are the last people who actually go with like a real true star system, is they'll be like, yeah, it's a 3 star hotel. And then you look and all the reviews are still like 4 stars and everything. And sometimes you'll have you'll see the negative reviews on like Motel Sixes and everything where it's like terrible experience, and it's like you went to a 1 or 2 star hotel, like it's going to be a 1 or 2 star experience and everything. But it's interesting when everything else has to be 5 stars or it's not good. It creates this hard situation. Like I drove for Uber years ago briefly to get their bonus, and my rating slipped below a 4.6, and they wanted me to pay like $60 for a driving course before I could get back on the road. And it's like it just doesn't make sense because it throws things off. If everyone's just giving 5 stars because that's the nice thing to do, you end up with this awkward situation where I've been in 4.5 star, 4.7 star Ubers that smelled like someone had freshly smoked a cigarette in them, possibly the driver. And I think it kind of complicates things. And I think in a way it is because of this sense we have as a culture that everything has to be great. Everyone's doing better than us. Like everyone has to be 5 stars all the time when that isn't necessarily sustainable or realistic. And it makes it so now at this point, a lot of times reviews are almost useless at this point because it's really hard to get good feedback. Like you'll look at so many businesses and it's either 5 stars or 1 stars. And at that point, you're like, might as well use the Netflix thumbs up, thumbs down thing they started doing after the whole Amy Schumer thing. But that was a whole side tangent. But essentially, AI has been helpful for me to learn some more home improvement skills. I also do a lot of YouTube videos or watch instructions because to me, it's always been fascinating to learn how to do new things. Like to gain a new skill, to see how people do something is like always exciting for me. Whenever people have done stuff like we had the foundation worked on, it was nice to have one of the guys like showed me exactly what they do, and the whole process was fascinating of like digging the channels down and then putting concrete or steel piers and then concrete blocks on top and then little metal shims to like level it. Like they jacked it all into place and like did the measurements to make sure they lifted it because our garage was trying to secede from the house and we needed to keep the union together. So we had to get the garage in line and stuff because I don't know why they decided to do a slightly offset slab connected to the main slab for something that is kind of a bit flexible and we have a whole driveway thing. But the point of the story is not that. The point was it was fascinating to like get to see them work and get to know a bit of what people are doing because at the end of the day, like I think it's good to learn stuff from other people. And I think it's very important, especially when things can be a bit isolated, like I work remotely. It's nice to be able to have real interactions because I think oftentimes we do kind of dehumanize each other in many ways with the culture of saying, like, oh, well, this is actually a customer service agent. This is a team member. Instead, this is a person helping you with a real life, real things going on and stuff. And I think for me, I happen to be very, very lucky and blessed with the fact that I work from home and I can bring my whole self to work. Like my coworkers probably sometimes wish that maybe I wasn't always my full self because my full self can be a lot, but it's really nice to be able to be the same version of myself with everyone rather than when I did customer service and everything having to put on the customer service voice and this whole thing of, especially when your income relies on tips, you have to be positive about things. And to be fair, I really enjoyed it. Delivering pizza was great because you have the variability of motion with standing, sitting, driving. You can listen to music. You can do what you want depending on the store you worked at. You could smoke cigarettes in your car, which back in the early 20s, my early 20s, that was a perk and everything. But it also showed a valuable life lesson. Like it was interesting how many times I had coworkers, and I did it before, where you would get I would get a bad delivery and it would change my whole mindset about the day. I would just get much more negative, and people could sense that energy. You get less talkative, you're kind of brusque with people because you're so frustrated, and it's this compounding thing, kind of like yesterday talking about the fact that when you're feeling down, you oftentimes stop doing the things you should be doing to like help get out of it. And it's easy in that way, especially with like delivery sometimes. I remember it was interesting because if I didn't check my attitude and try to reset after a bad experience with someone, it was very easy for like my tips to start to dip and everything. And I think it was helpful to realize that people have their own lives and you can't always know why people don't tip, or some people don't realize the importance of it, especially when you're driving your car, you're putting damage on it. It's very important to have like decent tips and everything. And I get some people are like, why did I pay you extra for just doing your job? And it's like, in a perfect world, we would just pay people slightly more and charge slightly more, like theaters in some places do now, where everything's 18% more, or there's an automatic included gratuity, which I actually prefer because I think having a system where we all pay in is much better than a system where those of us who tip well are subsidizing the people who don't tip at all. So I think that it's important to like keep those kind of perspectives and stuff and be able to have grace with other people and be able to, I think, be yourself with other people. And I think tying this back into what I was originally saying, well, it is helpful of having AI explain things to me when people aren't around. It's also been really nice to like learn from people as they're doing things. And oddly enough, as I have more tools and more experience, a lot of repair people actually give me advice on how to do things myself. And it can save a ton of money. Like, I was able to replace the UV bulb up in our HVAC system. I was able to replace one of the duct lines. And I realized that our attic was miserable. Like, I realized that I hadn't ever tried to really do work up there, and it was not fun. And I realized why it's so expensive. It was inaccessible, it's dangerous. There's kind of this weird little loop you have to do of like under the joist, like there's a section where you essentially have to crawl through, which is not great. So since then, I've put down 2x4s and then 3/4 plywood on top of it. So there's nice little workstations, trying to make it a little bit more well lit and accessible because I realized that, and this was very much part of what the Courage to Be Disliked was about, of trying to shift your mindset with relationships, thinking of things as much more horizontal rather than vertical, because it's very easy to see people as above you or below you, and that can oftentimes like muddy the waters or make relationships weird, because then you start to, it's very easy to be maybe short or dismissive with people below you, or like feel like the people above you have more than you do. So sometimes you're like ruder than you could be. Or a lot of times I've realized, especially for me, I tend to kind of have an issue with authority, kind of like very somewhat defiant person. It's hard for me to do things that I don't understand the value of, which the older I get, the more I realize you just have to accept some things, because things won't always be easy or nice. But when you start thinking of things as horizontal relationships, you start to treat people as peers. And it comes back to essentially the golden rule of do unto others as you would have them do unto you. That it's really important to be able to like see people as peers and equals. And I know I sound like a broken record because the Courage to Be Disliked was just that good, that it really did help me a lot. I think overall, that was a big shift, and trying to be a bit more optimistic about things. Like for me, I was very skeptical about the AI stuff and everything. And a part of me, I would still much rather they change some of the business practices. And I hate subsidizing the electrical costs. Like, there are problems for sure, but there also are exciting things. I think if they could maybe stop bragging about AI doing art and music while the rest of us still do chores, and focused a bit more on like giving us time to spend time with loved ones, like I think that would have been a much better way to advertise the whole system, to say this can help with those tedious tasks that you don't care about, so that way you can actually think of good gifts for your loved ones, or like thoughtfully respond to messages and everything, because it is helpful when you have some of like the email summaries and stuff for like really long things from the HOA or a notice from the city or whatever. It is helpful to be able to just get the details that you need and stuff. And like I've been able to do that too. I actually got the email address of a woman who works for the city for Hutto and was able to contact her to get the light timing changed near us. On one, they added a light system to the highway near us, which was not a highway when we bought this house. And when they added it, it only turned green for like 5 seconds, and it was maddening to have 8 cars ahead of you and be like, we're gonna have to go through at least 3 light cycles. And I, being the impatient person I am, I don't drive very much because I work from home. And the first time I hit it, I was like, this is terrible. And I told Andy about it, and she was like, oh yeah, no, it's nuts. Like, you're lucky if there are 3 cars ahead of you, you're really lucky if you can get through. And I was able to just quickly go through my emails and found that there was a notice about it going in. And there's a little email address at the bottom for feedback. And I sent a notice to the woman. I was like, please, 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 this is terrible. Can you up the time to at least like 20 seconds or something reasonable? And it's crazy because the next day I saw someone out there and the timing was set up and everything. Like, it's crazy because I went to HEB over lunch and I came back, and it's funny because it turned green, and I there were 4 cars ahead of me, and I was like, please, 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 hopefully I have time. And I counted, and it was 20 seconds, which was very handy. So there are those moments where, like, without the help of AI, it would have been much harder for me to just quickly scan through a ton of emails to find a way to do this. Or so things like that are very helpful and everything. But also, I think it's important to realize that most people are generally good and trying their best with yesterday's theme, and that there's a lot we can learn from people. Because a lot of times I think there is maybe a portion of the population that might be a bit difficult, 5% possibly, but the majority of people are great. Like, delivering for Domino's, I get to talk to dozens of people every night, and like, the vast majority were very pleasant. There was those like 1 out of every 20 interactions that weren't necessarily great, but sometimes you would actually get to see them later. And there were times where I had people give me a larger tip next time because they're like, yeah, I realized I didn't tip you last night or the week before because I was just in a real bad mood and a bunch of stuff had happened with work and the kids were driving me nuts. So I just signed the credit card receipt and gave it back to you without thinking. Like, hopefully this makes it up or makes it better. So then you maybe get like a $10 tip or something. And it was nice to have those moments because I think it can be very easy to get pessimistic. And I get exceptionally pessimistic, especially when I'm alone with my thoughts. So this is kind of a way for me to be able to process things in a way. And I did want to clarify that the mace training was physical mace training, swinging the weighted mace around, not testing out maces, the spicy maces, which I do think it would be a hilarious bit to have a show called Spicy Ones, where you just test different variations of mace, but it would be dangerous, huge liability, not a good idea. Don't do that. Don't encourage anyone to try it. But yeah, overall, hopefully this recording setup was better. I realize we are close to the 30-minute mark, and I don't want to necessarily get too wild with it, so I will sign off for the day. Thank you for tuning in.